Another important element of symphonic architecture is the harmonic or key relations between the individual movements. And Beethoven's second movement is in the key of A flat major, which is definitely in the tonal realm of C minor. C minor, A flat major. In fact, these two notes, C and E flat, are common to both keys and triads. C minor, A flat. So there's an organic continuity between the first and second movements. Also fascinating are the subtle implications of certain keys for composers. Certain tonalities seem to evoke certain character in their music. And Beethoven's music in A flat major during this time tends to be very melodic, relaxed, and genial. The andante of his Pathetique sonata for piano, for example, this familiar music, which, like the Fifth Symphony's second movement, also follows a tempestuous C minor first movement. Then there's Beethoven's Opus 26 piano sonata in A flat, which begins not with an energetic allegro, but with a surprisingly laid-back theme and variations on this theme.
Do you have a certain image or relationship with the key of A flat major? I mean, he talked about the Opus 26 sonata, he talked about the second movement of the Pathetique, and later on in the Romantic era, many pieces are written in the A flat major. And you as a sort of Bach specialist, you played a lot of these Prelude and Fugues probably, or pieces that are in A flat. So what's your view of this?
Absolutely. Well, first of all, I want to underscore that I wasn't hands-on with this production of the film. I had to step out because people who were actually creating the film were so much better qualified to do this than me. But I was an observer at awe with the process, and I just was there for their discussions, and I remember very vividly the discussion about the colors and just like what you're bringing up. And there was a number of people involved, of course, in production of these films, and some more technical, some more, constructing the storyboards of it and deciding which images will go and so forth. And there was a heated discussion about the colors.
Okay.
And every step of the way, there was a lot of back and forth on deciding which colors should represent what part of the description of Larry Rapchak's story about this theme, especially that particular segment of the symphony. The whole film, of course, has a lot of play with the black and white and grayish color and different hues and different colors clashing and changing. And there was so much research the guys did on how people perceive the colors to be contrasting, which colors are clashing and creating dissonant impression and so forth. There's a lot of play with the colors in those films. Absolutely. Now, to your question about the color of the A flat major, to me personally, A flat major or all of the keys of majors or minors and diminished and augmented, any harmonic compilation chord or harmony has a color. Okay, I'm very visual, so for me this has its own storyline of colors, but I can't say that I intuitively assign a particular color to particular key signature or scales or harmony, like as a set, like you would do if you were a painter with a palette.
No, of course
this is
not.
the red.
No,
this
no,
is,
yeah.
but for some people, for painters, that's really important. You need to know that red is red, right? And it's red no matter what you do with it. But for me, it's not like that. For me, the colors of the keys change their hue depending on the context. And for me, music exists in motion. It's never like a succession frames. For me, it's a very fluid thing. And for me, for instance, the beginning of the second movement if I were thinking in colors, it would be probably some dark purple, but it would be influenced by the color of the ending of the first movement, and then as it progresses, it kind of takes over
Interesting.
the hue
Okay.
of the previous harmony, and so same with it. So it's a more like the colors changing hues as the influence of the previous harmony wears off, and the next harmony takes more prominent presence, and then gives way to the next harmonic change. So that's how I perceive the colors in music.
And now, in the Fifth Symphony, we have one of Beethoven's most unusual symphonic movements, also in A flat major, with a unique structure and a rather misleading tone to it, for lack of a better word. This is the spot for the traditional slow movement in a symphony, and in fact we often hear this second movement played much slower than Beethoven marked it, as if to force it to be something it's not. And that's part of its unique quality, that after the tempest of the first movement, Beethoven now writes what is essentially an intermezzo, beginning with a lyrical and rather breezy main theme marked andante con moto, or moving ahead and with motion, which clearly tells us that this is not ponderous music. So there's the main theme of the second movement. And like the A-flat piano sonata that I played, this second movement is also a theme and variations. It's also in a flowing triple meter, that is 3/8 notes to a bar, and they both include a florid variation of the theme. In the sonata, we have this. And both include a minor key variation. Again, in the sonata, and these were very standard devices for variations at the time. But that's where the similarities end. Beethoven is now, in his Fifth Symphony, writing a symphonic movement, not a start and stop set of variations, but music that grows and expands and develops, and whose basis is a set of variations.
That's the thing that's very subjective, right? That's what makes the music subjective. It's not so much, and maybe perhaps when you play a passionata or you play something in F minor, for you, you think more of that lyricism, maybe differently to if it were in C minor. And it's very interesting to see certain pieces, like Schubert has a sonata which he writes later on in E flat, but initially he conceived of it in D flat major, and he later on scrapped it and changed it to E flat. And I find that sort of thing very fascinating, because in an era perhaps where keys don't mean as much, for them it meant so much, and the breakdown of tonality towards the end of the 20th century and the beginning of the 20th century sort of maybe shifted the way we thought about tonalities. And so bringing it back to the video, where we have these colors that are associated with certain keys, where we have different images and different associations later on in the next couple of parts, you have these aerial shots of German villages or Austrian villages, and this pastoral, like you said, it's very clear that it's linked, that there's a sort of a connection between the key that the composer uses and the sort of emotional or imagery associations that come into it. So yeah.
Oh, definitely. Music evokes wide scope of imagination and imagery, and of course, it's one thing to perceive that as a receiver of what the composer wrote, and have your own form your own relationship with what the composer wrote and what key he used and all that. But it's a different thing to be on the other side of the fence in there and to be creating those pieces, because when you're creating, you can't have enormous global data to tell you which keys people perceive how. So you sort of have to do it empirically. And that is to me an extraordinarily fascinating process, to kind of work your way backwards from the final product, like Beethoven's symphony. What Lawrence Rapchak is doing, he's taking the symphony and the very minimalist amount of data Beethoven left behind, with a few markings, like he's pointing out that andante con moto means moving forward ahead with, with motion. And this is not a lot of instruction there, right, to go by. And then he really goes back, analyzing and understanding all those connections in there in an extremely precise way, which reveals to me the answer to the question, how do you make that piece evoke my imagination and connect me so passionately and personally, and you, because you have a different, we all have different personal ways of perceiving those things. But how does a composer like Beethoven create a universally unifying piece where, with all those different hues and colors which we imagine, we still are all on the same page with the piece? We all love it.
And what really distinguishes this unique second movement are two elements in addition to its genial theme. First, there is a recurring sense of mystery, that sort of shadowy netherworld so prominent in the first movement. And second, the appearance 3 times of a majestic march in C major, totally unexpected and seemingly at odds with the rest of the material. As I say, this is a very unusual movement in context and architecture. So we first hear that lovely cello theme, which begins with the 3 notes of an A-flat major triad. And this theme is based entirely on what we call a dotted rhythm. Dum, ba-bum, ba-bum. Technically, you put a dot on one of the 2 notes, and it makes it a little longer, and that makes the second note a little shorter, and it gives the tune a certain lilt or swagger. And for all its loveliness, this theme is remarkably bare. It's just the melody in unison, violas and cello, with only a solitary pizzicato bass line underneath. But together, the shape of the melody and the bass gives us enough that we can sort of fill in the harmonies on our own. There's C major. And the theme ends with this same dotted rhythm on an A-flat triad, which is odd since it almost introduces a slight military fanfare element into this gentle music. And this cadence is now repeated twice, first by the full string section, and then, like a gentle echo, repeated by the woodwinds, which then continue like so, very gently, with a little cadence. And the strings respond now with a variation of this woodwind phrase, complete with the same cadence. It's like, okay, who's going to get the final word here with this cadence? Woodwinds or strings? But they end together. And thus ends the first theme.
Wow, it's just stunning, isn't it? How he composes such an amazing piece with all these different kind of elements all added up within the first 16 measures. It's really wonderful.
Absolutely. And this insight into the details,
Yeah.
even though it may seem like maybe very technical and who really cares, right? But it basically peels off the onion to the core principles which really make Beethoven such an incredible communicator and makes us all connect to his music. It didn't happen by just some mysterious strike of genius.
Yeah.
Beethoven really constructed that engagement and gave it a lot of thought. So my gratitude goes to Larry Rapchak for really unveiling how this is done by a genius composer. And for me as an educator, this is incredibly important because Beethoven was not born this kind of communicator. He created the skill through thought process and trial and error, of course.
Absolutely.
And how do we learn? We learn from the best. Let's learn from what went into his way of constructing the symphony, the theme. Now here we spend, 10, 15 minutes on looking at step by step, detail by detail, into how just the theme of the second movement is constructed, and what kind
Absolutely.
of tensions and harmonic changes and all of that Beethoven put in there. And this is basically answering the very important question to all musicians and non-musicians too: why this music is so magnificently captivating.
Yeah, and I love how, along with the musically captivating side of the video we watched, it's also the video editors who put in these colors and these different images of what these tonalities and these keys mean.
But this is exactly the point at which that mysterious quality first enters. The music seems to hover. But listen to where it leads. This blazing, majestic march. And I love that low C in the cellos and basses. And it emerges from the gloom, and then it fades back into it.
My impression of this whole documentary series so far, especially we're in part 5 now, is that I think, well, first of all, I've already shown one of my students part 1 of this. And I think it's, and she's just 10 years old, but I think it's a really good way to introduce this kind of music where you break it down and then you get to hear it again. And there's piano little parts, so you can almost imagine yourself, maybe if you're a bit more advanced, playing it as well. You know, I think he takes lists or whoever's transcription of the symphony and puts it in. So you feel that not only is it very practical and hands-on, but what I love about what Larry does is he adds narration, narrative, rhetoric, imagery, and along with the video editors, gives you this sense that the music isn't so static and you just sit there as an audience member still and waiting for it to pass by you. You feel like you're part of the action. You feel like you can really immerse yourself. And I think that's one of the best things for audience members, to feel as if they can be immersed in the music. I often tell my audience members not to watch me play. I'm not really interested in being an actor on stage and showing the music through my facial expressions or ways I move my hands. That's sometimes aids the way that the performance is, because it's obviously a visual performance too. But I think often about what draws me to the music is the insight, the character, the narration, and the story that it's trying to say and tell, and the emotions that are coming across. And I think what Larry does really well is he pinpoints very accurately what these emotions are. So when you're listening, and when you're listening to it again, you're hearing nuances, you're hearing extra details, but it doesn't get in the way academically. It just feels like it's adding more trees to the forest. And so as you're walking through it, you're admiring more of what there is, and you feel like it's a familiar place to be and a place you want to stay in.
Into the mist, recalling the first movement. And no surprise, it's a diminished seventh chord that makes all of this possible. But the entire orchestra now enters with this same chord, except that the lowest note is altered from A down to A flat, which also alters the function of the chord. In fact, it now sounds exactly like our standard dominant seventh chord on A flat, which should resolve like so. Curtain. But instead, Beethoven stuns us in a blaze of glory, resolving this chord like this. And the second theme, formerly so graceful, now transformed into a triumphant procession in C major, almost an antidote to all of the C minor Sturm und Drang from the first movement. But this momentary glory fades with that same dotted figure that has been so prominent. And the music slips back into diminished seventh gloom.
I took a
Yeah.
ungodly number of music history courses. Can't even count how many when I was a student. And I remember some of them were very informative. And back then there was no internet, so I couldn't Google the information. So I had to get it from the course teacher and or from the library. And so getting the information was really important. But some teachers went in the direction of what Larry Rapchak does, and that was years ago when I was a very young person. I still remember those lectures when it went beyond just informing future professional musicians of what's there and what the history context and all that information. It went into this narration and story where all these historic elements and all this knowledge just becomes a support for being engaged in the story itself as the composer tells it. And I think that's the magic of Larry's narrative, plus his incredible voice, plus the subtle and elegant sense of humor he includes in
Absolutely.
So Beethoven now essentially repeats all of this to form the second major section or panel of this movement. But there are some changes. And since this is a theme in variations, the main theme is now elaborated by the violas and celli. And those isolated E flats that we heard now leave one clarinet hanging over this new florid variation. And once again, these strings extend the theme. And we come to expect this string passage after each variation. And Beethoven plays on our expectations, as he will do something very special when this passage makes its final appearance. You'll see. But for now, we hear those repeated cadences in the strings, answered an octave higher by the woodwinds, and then all together. This all seems very formulaic, like there's a prerequisite number of formal bows in this courtly music, like, after you, Professor. And oh no, I wouldn't dream of it, dear doctor. Okay, then everybody together. Like, let's all bow together and have done with it.
And it's interesting, and I would love to ask you what you think. It's about the way drama unfolds in this. Do we really need this much drama? Like, suddenly diminished chords and in the woodwinds, and suddenly it's this, and then you have this great C major, and then we don't know what's going to happen. Like, do we need that? Or why is that more important than let's just sit in A flat major and something beautiful like that for 6-7 minutes? Why do we have to have all this drama? I'm curious to know what it does to you as an audience member. Is this what makes Beethoven great?
Yeah, I actually would like to pose that question to our audience and encourage everyone to please head to the comments section, whether on any platform, wherever you're watching, and we are on all platforms, all around, all the normal one, very standard YouTube and LinkedIn and Facebook and all of these platforms, and also on many music performance, management, music education, and other related platforms all around the world. All of those have chat sections or comment sections. And I would like to take Chris's question and offer it to our members of the audience to see if they might have an insight and a response to that. And the question was,
Yeah.
let me try to
Paraphrase it. Yes.
paraphrase
of
it
course.
and save, of course, save if I make it wrong. The question was, there's so much drama, so much unexpected, so much peaks and valleys in this second movement, which traditionally is a slow and contrasting movement to all the drama in the first and next movements. Now, do we need all that drama? Why not just sit in a very peaceful and pleasing A flat major for 7 minutes, duration of that movement? Why all this drama?
Yeah.
Did I say it right, Chris?
Yeah, that's exactly it. You really paraphrased it perfectly, because I'm thinking a lot about this because composers often write music, and artists and creators create masterpieces or pieces of art, and you often need to be really immersed in a certain emotion or the drama of life in order for you to produce something. And why do we need art? Or why do we need someone to emulate that experience and then for us to experience it? Why are we continually drawn to great movies which go through highs and lows? And why is it that we are drawn to those great stories, even if we know how it ends? Like you've probably heard Beethoven 5 many times, and yet listening to it again and again, it just, how it's going to go, but yet it's attractive.
Yeah, you're so right. You know how it's going to go, and you know how it's going to end. It's the same for a lot of great film and other pieces of art, novels, which we read again. What's the point? What's the reason, right? For me, that would be, and always is, I know how it's going to end, but I want to experience the journey one more time.
Mm-hmm.
The path it takes, and the turns and twists of the events and what I feel as they unfold.
I've been thinking a lot about how when we watch actors in a movie or in a theater go through certain emotions, we know that they're acting, but we also know that they're trying to immerse themselves in the drama of life or drama of whatever the story that they're in. And we participate in that insofar as the acting is supreme. Like if it's a good actor, if it's someone who really embodies those emotions, those words, those feelings, the meaning behind the drama, then we experience it. We feel that, and yet we know we're not part of the story. And yet, because of our human condition, the drama of human life, we also participate in it. And it gives us a sense of hope, relief, empathy. I don't know, I'm exploring this idea of it, because if we could feel everything that the musician, Beethoven, the actors are all trying to emote, then we go through the story too with them.
No matter where you are or who you are, music connects us all. We started with a dream, but now we are paving the future. Welcome to the Sound Expressiva Global Competition. Fully virtual, yet bringing musicians closer together than ever before, now on a global scale. True live, inclusivity, diversity, connection, community, an extraordinary array of judges. Get noticed by companies all over the world. Prizes, scholarships, performance opportunities. Apply to be a part of the most exciting congregation of artists like nothing you've ever seen before. We guarantee quality and leave no musician behind. We can't wait to hear you on the virtual stage.